call this meeting to order. This is our October 2021 monthly meeting. And with that, I'd like each of our leadership team members to quickly identify what area they represent, and then we'll get on with the rest of the meeting. So why don't we start with Commissioner Vania?
Yeah, I'm District 1 Planning Commissioner and the Infrastructure Lead.
Michael Lowenthal, I chair the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, Cindy Bird.
Oh, I'm Cindy Munt, Supervisor Heidal's assistant, and I do community information and outreach for the council.
I'm John Heidel, District 1 Supervisor.
John Davey, I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee.
I'm Richard Ross. I sit in a chair called Good Governance, which tries to review and understand the activities that go on in our local government.
And Glenn, I see you're online with us, and Sita is also. So please share with us your responsibilities here.
Hi, good evening. Glenn Krakow with Community and Economic Development.
Thank you. And Sita?
Hi, I'm Sita Burgess. I am the Healthy Communities Liaison.
Okay, could you repeat? You were almost silent to start out with, and then you came on real loud. So I'm not sure what happened there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Sita Burgess, the Healthy Communities Liaison.
Thank you, Sita. Okay. And we also like to recognize volunteers that are either part of a commission or committee. So Tita, why don't you just share with us what your responsibilities are? Thank you. I think that's everybody here. So I will just recognize that Tim White is also shared responsibility with the APAC. So we kind of treat him as almost another leader member, almost. But he has a lot of involvement too, which I'm sure he will share with us as we get into this evening's discussions, particularly against APAC. So with that, I'm going to ask is anyone on the leadership team wanting to change anything in the agenda the way it's identified? Seeing none, we'll accept the agenda as presented. And then that takes us to public comment. So anyone present either on Zoom or here in the fire station conference room that would like to address the leadership team of Community Council on any item that's not on tonight's agenda. And I think they would like you to use the microphone, if you would, please, and just identify yourself for us, and that'll start the conversation.
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Maria White. Do I say I live in El Dorado Hills?
If you like, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of noise recently on local social media on the matter of the old golf course rezoning. A common refrain is that the other 4 supervisors have already indicated how they plan to vote. Would you or could you please take a moment to comment?
Yes. So we were instructed by county council that anytime you pre-declare a position on a project that's being brought forward, you can be challenged for bias. And there have been court cases where certain people in elected positions have been challenged for bias, in which case the ruling they made is overruled. So in terms of maintaining my ability to vote on any one thing and recognizing that there's a constant set of changes going on behind the scenes that most people don't recognize, has been going on for like 4 or 5 years, that I don't know what's going to be presented to the Planning Commission. To this date, I don't know, because there had to be an additional traffic study done. There's some things that are going to change the original picture of what that project is substantially. And then I want to hear what the Planning Commission has to say about it. So if I were to declare a position on it right now, then I would essentially have to recuse myself from voting because I have this bias that's already been built in. So that's the reason, and I can present that information in terms of what Community Council actually presented. People don't want to believe it, but there's a lot of people that don't want to follow state law. We've seen that with the COVID, right? They don't want to follow state law. So that's their prerogative to the extent that they don't do harm to other people. So, but that's the basic reason, is that there are court cases that say if you pre-declare a vote on something in an elected position, then you can be accused of bias and judge can end up reversing that decision. So that's the long and the short of it. There's a lot of other things that play into it, but I, to this day, like I said, don't know what's going to be proposed when it gets to the Planning Commission. My understanding is there are some substantial changes, at least in circulation. So we will see. Hopefully that satisfies it.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
And I don't know how to really phrase it. So I will say, should I then send a message to the other 4 supervisors asking how they will vote? Have they indeed announced how they will plan to vote? Or is this just a rumor that just keeps building and building? And honestly, you're the odd guy out.
I don't know what other supervisors have said to people. I don't know what they put on social media. I don't follow that. So you're welcome to ask that question. I think it just creates more confusion and perhaps misrepresentation of things. So I don't really know. I know where I stand on it, and that's what I have to be clear on. So I'm following the legal aspects of what you do when you review a project of this size. So
Can I post your comments?
certainly,
Okay.
this is all recorded, so it's public information, but you can post it. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of public information out there. It doesn't mean anyone pays attention.
I
Could I
agree.
make a comment? Could I make a comment
Okay, well, let's finish. Okay, on this subject.
on good governance?
Okay, go ahead.
Social media has caused a great deal of undermining of factual communication. It has allowed for the easy transference of bias confirmation to anybody's particular position because there is so much social media information. You could build an arc out of it, which has no sense whatsoever, does it? But that's what we are seeing, and that's what we become and fall victim to. There are public forums in which you can participate, you can sit and you can listen and you can ask questions of the parties who are specifically involved in making the decisions or making recommendations. All the other chatter is nothing more than fan chatter at a football game, watching the game, and should not affect the decisions you make. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, so Steve.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Steve Ferry. I'm from El Dorado Hills. I'm from the Southern District down in District 2. We've heard from the Auditor Controller and from the CAO that we have had a tremendous, wonderful year of collecting money for this county, that you actually have a lot of money. And we've also been told that we're getting a $2 million push into the budget for roads. I just drove here on El Dorado Hills Boulevard. It is a mess in front of Rayleigh's. My wife and I have already spent more than $1,000 fixing a tire and replacing a wheel, replacing the tire too. My point is that if you have that much money, and how much money is it? I'll let you comment about that when I'm done.
Well, the CAO already has it allocated. So when you say that much money.
Yeah, I understand, but you allocate it. He hands you a budget and says, do this. It's
Makes a
your vote that
recommendation,
gets
yes.
it. My
Yes.
point is, as we know what $1 million would pay for, darn little, to actually think that $2 million is going to help the 1,100 miles of El Dorado County roads.
The number is 3 million actually is what the board approved, but
Good.
that's okay.
It should be about 12 or 15 million.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to make that comment so that you'd have it. We've had that discussion at taxpayers. I'm not representing taxpayers here. I just happen to attend there. And it is a serious subject, and especially for those people up the hill. I mean, they really got problems. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I will add one comment to that. I had a discussion with our CAO today. The board had set aside, I think it was $4.5 million in the event that FEMA didn't reimburse us for all of the damage that was done from the flooding like 3 years ago. And lo and behold, FEMA hasn't reimbursed us for everything. But at this point in time, most of the corrective action's been taken, and there's about $1.5 million in that account. So there'll be an item coming before the board to take and transfer that money to the road fund to be used by DOT to do whatever improvements on the priority listing that they have. But the idea is it came from the road fund to start with. It needs to go back to the road fund with residual. So that action should be coming forward. So if you take the 1.5, I think is what it is, added to the 3, that's 4.5. So it improves it. It doesn't solve the problem, but appreciate your comments. Okay, any other public comment at this point? Okay, so seeing none on that, we'll close out the public comment portion. We'll move on to our guest speaker. And Brandon, are you with us? I can see your Zoom connection, but I can't see you. Are you there?
Needs to unmute.
And you're muted, Brandon, so we can't hear you. There we go. All right. Hey, you're still muted, but can you unmute? You're still muted, but can you unmute? Perfect.
Hi, good afternoon, Supervisor Hydall. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through fine. So I wanted to introduce our guest speaker, Brandon Sanders. He's from PG&E Government Relations, and I asked him to speak to the PSPS event planning. We know there's been a lot of things that have happened over the last year with respect to PG&E and microgridding and a lot of things to hopefully reduce the probability of major outages in some areas of the county. But there's some things I think we can all learn on what that particular planning is that's being put in place this year. And then also with the Kaldor Fire, there's been a renewed interest in looking at trying to move towards undergrounding of power lines, particularly in areas where a lot of the obstacles have been removed. A lot of the trees have been cut down because they had to be. There's a lot of things. So Grizzly Flat would be one of the first areas we'd look at, and that's PG&E's determination whether that's appropriate or not. But my understanding is PG&E has dedicated more money to go to undergrounding in key high-risk areas. So that's the other thing I want Brandon to share with us is that direction, because a lot of us who've seen, for years and years, all of the wires running through our communities, and particularly where there's high vegetation and the clearing of all that, recognize even though there's still maintenance once you underground utilities, if they're undergrounded, you have a lower risk of the squirrels getting in there or doing something else that starts a fire, right? So lightning strikes, all those kinds of things. If you underground it, you're going to be in a safer condition from the standpoint of wildfire. So we're all interested in that. It's just, what can you afford to pay for? Because it all takes money. So with that kind of as a backdrop, Brandon, I hope I didn't set you up or anything, but I would like to just turn it over to you and to share with us, first of all the work that PG&E has put into PSPS planning and anything that's new relative to how those calls are going to be made. And then I think obviously one of the things I've learned is that the inspections afterwards are going to be much quicker, hopefully this year than they were last year, to turn the power back on once that event is basically concluded. So, but over to you, Brandon. Go ahead and do whatever background, personal experience notation up front you would like to do to share with us kind of your experience in this area, and then on to the subject matter.
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Hydall. So hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Sanders. I'm a senior government relations representative for PG&E. I work in our local public affairs group as the liaison between cities and counties within our Sierra division, which largely encompasses the Highway 50 and Interstate 80 corridors, as well as the Highway 49 corridor, basically from the El Dorado Amador County line up to Yuba Pass in Sierra County. And so I've been in this position for going on 7 years now, and there was a time, I guess it would have been about a year ago, where I was the assigned representative for El Dorado County. We then brought a new staff member on board who decided that she wanted to go a different direction. And so I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of working with Supervisor Hydall at sort of the onset of PSPS and the beginning of our community wildfire safety program. And I would like to thank the supervisor and definitely Cindy Munt for the opportunity to join you here this evening. So speaking to El Dorado Hills specifically, as it relates to PSPS, we can expect to see impacts to be quite limited for areas, let's say downstream or west of Cameron Park. We have really good system resiliency in that area, especially in sort of what I would consider central El Dorado Hills, with a lot of that electrical infrastructure currently underground. The supervisor is correct. We have set a lofty goal of furthering the extent of our underground electric distribution system, looking at opportunities to do that in the interest of, one, wildfire risk mitigation, but also to mitigate impacts from public safety power shutoff to those communities neighborhoods, areas of the county that are most significantly affected year over year. And so that program is in its fledgling stage. We've stated our goal. We're lining up work plans. We are continuing to engage with local government stakeholders. I actually have a task myself as of this morning, which I'm working through to engage at the city and county level to work with local governments to identify priorities for that type of work. I intend to continue engagement around that issue, and we're really looking for undergrounding opportunities focused on where we can mitigate the risk of catastrophic wildfire most substantially. And so, the supervisor mentioned impacts from the Kaldor Fire. I can speak to that. Essentially, what we're looking to do is restore electric service to everyone or every home and business that can safely receive it. We are building that system back in the overhead in a hardened fashion, which means we are doing deeper set, taller power poles, wider steel cross arms or fiberglass cross arms as opposed to wood, and also building back with a coated conductor versus the traditional bare aluminum conductor. And the reason that we're doing that is we want to restore service and some sense of normalcy to those who can have it as quickly as possible. Now, the follow-on to that is we are actively exploring opportunities to rebuild in the underground for other areas of the county who might have more substantial impacts and more loss of structures, if you will. It's important to note that building in the underground is very complex, whereas an overhead electrical system, you have a very small footprint, let's say the size of a basketball even, where you set a pole, the equipment is above ground, it's very easily accessible for repair and maintenance and inspection. So, and we have our franchise agreements, which is essentially our franchise arrangement with the county to have that electrical infrastructure exist within the county right-of-ways, as well as some land rights across private properties. What we're facing in terms of undergrounding large sections of the electric distribution system is complex land rights, traversing private residential properties, business properties, industrial timberland, state, federal, and local government ownerships, and a number of other significant considerations such as cultural and historical resources, archaeological resources, existing underground infrastructure such as stormwater, wastewater, drinking water, telecommunications, natural gas, and the like. So I just want to impress upon this group that it's very complex, but all of that aside, we're committed to meeting our goal as stated, and it's just going to take time. This isn't going to be something that occurs this year or maybe even within 3 years, but we are laser focused on doing everything we can to put our system in a safer and more resilient state so that we can build the energy future of our country and our state. So that sort of covers the high points. Supervisor Heidel, I'd be welcome to field any questions that might come from you or your group here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's open it up for leadership team questions, if any, for Brandon relative to either PSPS or underground. Yeah, Richard.
Question, and is this my microphone and he can hear okay?
Should be able to, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I can hear you.
To give us a concept or a view of the scope of what PG&E is tasked with, approximately how many hundreds or thousands of miles do you estimate you have of above ground transmission lines in the regions of California that you view as high risk?
That's an excellent question, and I'd like to start by differentiating between distribution and transmission. Transmission is the high voltage sort of trunk lines that deliver electric power across large landscapes. Distribution is the neighborhood level, if you will. I know, generally speaking, system-wide, we have over 120,000 miles of distribution circuit. I believe within the high fire threat district, it's just under half of that, just based on the geography that we serve. So I can certainly follow up with the supervisor with the exact numbers. I didn't come prepared with those this evening. I do apologize. But it's in the tens of thousands.
Okay. The reason I'm going
And
down
just-
this line,
Go ahead, please.
I'm wondering, relative to those areas where the lines have been identified as causing or starting a fire, are they primarily the transmission lines or the distribution lines?
Well, I can speak to what I know, and that is the campfire, for example, that occurred in the vicinity of Paradise, which we all know too well. That was from a transmission circuit. But I do understand that most wildfire ignitions from utility equipment do come from those lower voltage distribution circuits.
Okay. One of the
And that could be
reasons-
anything from a tree falling on the line. That could be animal contact. That could be a car accident, third party carpool accident. Could be equipment failure, lightning strikes. There's any number of things that could cause that. But the lion's share of wildfire ignitions from utility equipment would be from those lower voltage distribution circuits.
Lower voltage ones. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I have a question for you, Brandon. My name is Michael Anthony. I'm the deputy chief here in El Dorado Hills Fire Department. And a question for you, you kind of
Hello,
painted a
sir.
picture. How you doing? So you painted a picture of, this lofty gold underground electrical infrastructure and how complicated that is. That's kind of what I heard you say. Hoping you know El Dorado Hills a little bit. I think you have at least some familiarity. Do you know of an area in town here that's more suited for that might be beneficial of looking or seeking support for that type of a project to occur?
Chief, I really appreciate the question. I don't have that level of granularity in terms of my visibility into the system there locally. I mean, we're just embarking upon this journey, which we intend to do in close concert with the county. I actually have an email drafted and ready to send off to county leaders establishing a dialogue around this. And there's going to be an opportunity for, you in the public safety space, of certainly Supervisor Heidel and others, to help us identify where the priorities are for the county. And, that's going to be I'm framing it as a long range dialogue. I don't know that today, but our intent is to certainly engage in an ongoing dialogue we have visibility into, our technical folks. I'm not a technical person. I apologize. I can speak to it enough to get the point across, but we have folks that, in grid operations that have better visibility into where the opportunities might be. What we're looking to do is align those with the county's desires. That could be everything from, strictly a wildfire safety mitigation effort in the underground to a Main Street beautification where there's an undergrounding opportunity with a wildfire safety benefit. So I'm sorry, that was a very convoluted answer, but just to be direct, I don't have exact locations within the El Dorado Hills community at this time, but I can certainly get those to Supervisor Heidel.
And if there's a contact person where we could engage early dialogue from the chief's perspective, we would appreciate that.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, I would certainly encourage you to talk with Mike Webb, who you may be familiar with. He is our senior public safety specialist and a former fire professional. And he's more on the system level, whereas I focus more on the outreach piece. But I can certainly facilitate a conversation. Happy to do that.
No, if he's
Perhaps
the best point of
Cindy,
contact,
maybe you can. Okay, great.
Go ahead, yeah. The reason I'm interested in the difference between transmission and distribution, I know where the lines go through El Dorado Hills, they appear to be several large transmission lines, and beneath them, there looks like there's about 100-yard wide bare or low shrub areas underneath those. Are there any similar circumstances where the transmission lines traverse California that they have such equally wide spaces below them?
Appreciate the question. So we have both state and federal regulations that mandate certain clearance below those high voltage circuits. So we're talking upwards of 60,000 volts all the way up to 500. I think through your community, we have the 115 or 115,000 volt circuits going up through there. And we're mandated to keep, I don't know the exact measurements, but it's substantial under those transmission lines because just given the amount of energy flowing through them and in the interest of safety, they have to have wide clearances when compared to the distribution circuits, which are typically 15 feet either side of the conductor. But all of that is governed by state and federal law, and we are laser focused on our compliance in that regard.
So basically, you don't know how wide that space is then?
I think it depends on the voltage and the circuit, but I think it's safe to say that under those lattice towers, the large transmission towers that you see, I believe it could be anywhere from 100 to 300 feet either side of the tower or along the right of way. But I'd be happy to follow up with Supervisor Heidel or Cindy with the exact rules. But they're very prescriptive in state law and federal law, and that's what we comply with.
Okay. The reason I ask, at least the news media had carried one account that a tree had fallen on one of the lines that started one of the major fires that we have encountered here. And I don't know, I'm not into forestry, I'm not into electrical distribution, but it would seem that if a pathway was so wide that trees that do fall could not fall on the lines, there would be fewer opportunities, at least for the transmission lines, which I gather are probably generally unobserved, unlike distribution lines, because distribution lines usually go to commercial places or residences where there are people and eyeballs. So I'm wondering if the ability to further prevent fires could be taken above ground, because it sounds like putting wires underground sounds like a tremendously challenging circumstance in the topography that we have here in Northern California.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can elaborate a little bit.
Comment than asking a question, sorry.
Okay, well, I think it's an opportunity to clarify. So on the transmission circuits, those 60,000 volts up to 500 volts, 500,000 volts, it's not generally feasible to underground transmission level circuits because of heat dissipation. So imagine in the peak of the summer when every air conditioner in El Dorado Hills is running, if you have a 115,000 volt circuit buried in the ground, it requires a cooling system, which is not only, some people would say hypothetical, but it's just not cost efficient. You know, the opportunity for undergrounding is really at the distribution level in neighborhoods, traversing wildland landscapes to serve remote areas. I don't believe the conversation is really centered around undergrounding those high voltage circuits.
Okay.
So that's just an important differentiation to note.
Okay, thank you. That's a point of clarification. Thank you.
Brandon, going back to the chief's question, isn't it fair to assume that where you have wildland urban interfaces, that those would be priority type considerations for undergrounding, because that wildland interface obviously is a risk factor for any number of reasons, whether it's a lightning strike that starts a fire, whether it's illegal campgrounds, whatever it is, and then it comes right up into the community adjacent to it. So I would think that where you have that direct exposure, as opposed to in the center of a developed community with a lot of asphalt around it, that you have less susceptibility to the kinds of failures and instances we're talking about. So I would think that wildland urban interface would be one of the criteria that would be looked at. But do you know if there's any defined, steps of criteria to go through and look at? Is there anything that PG&E is established as kind of their sorting list, their prioritization listing?
That's an excellent question, Supervisor. Thank you. I can say matter of factly that fire risk is the first consideration. And so when talking about that fire risk, we're looking at the edges, right? So we have these tier 2 and tier 3 designations where, like you said, the highest risk butts up against an established community. So yes, absolutely, those are key considerations. So it's not just mitigating the impacts and extent of the public safety power shutoff, but in addition, it's really about limiting risk exposure to large population centers. So yes, I can absolutely say that that is a lens, a key lens, or even the primary lens through which we're looking at these undergrounding opportunities. I guess one additive thing is locations where there's been devastation due to wildfire. We also have a unique opportunity to build back the system in a different way, something different than we've ever done. So that's also a filter through which we're looking for opportunities to underground.
All right, very good. Any other leadership team comments or questions? So let's open it up. Anybody in the audience that would like to ask Brandon a question? Not seeing any. Anybody on Zoom has their hand up? I'm not seeing any.
I don't
So.
see any hands up.
All right, very good. So we'll look forward to future conversations at the board level, talking about the undergrounding and what parts of the county might fit. And, you know, the Kaldor situation, particularly Grizzly Flat, is an area of particular interest at this point, because with a lot of the PG&E work and AT&T and everybody else's work out there to take down trees, and there's going to be more of that happening with the Cal OES services to basically clean a lot up and provide for safety relative to if you were going to rebuild on a lot. So a lot of the tree removals and everything will be completed, but you still have those other issues you talked about of getting everybody's permission to do that undergrounding. But to me, that might be a real advantageous situation for that community. Now, it's not a high population, so always got to look at what are your cost benefit analysis. Do you really benefit that much from that level of costing? So that discussion will go on, but I think it's healthy to have the discussion. So as we know that areas are more prone to do undergrounding, you have to look at that opportunity. And I think, you know, as you mentioned before, I believe El Dorado County has a policy that if we're going to underground any form of utilities, we want to put fiber conduit in with it, because we want to make sure that ultimately when we get our broadband funding approved and we can start doing that last mile connection, that wherever possible, we've already done the trenching once. We got conduit in place. You basically pull the fiber through, and now you got your connectivity without that added cost of digging again. So we put that in place, I think, about 3 years ago. So look forward to being able to work with PG&E if we get to that point of, you know, trying to determine specific areas that would be amenable for that last mile connectivity. So thank you again. Appreciate your participation. And yeah, let's hope we have a reduced PSPS event, at least in El Dorado Hills, because I do think we're a little bit more resilient now than when we were when we started into this, because of some of the microgridding and other considerations. So we'll see how it plays out. But I know there's a lot of very vulnerable areas in El Dorado County. They're extremely vulnerable. So I think from the El Dorado Hills perspective, we're probably in the much lower probability of having 20 events this year, as opposed to some other areas where if you get the right wind conditions, you get the right environmental conditions, you could have multiple events in a sequence. So we just hope that doesn't happen from the Mother Nature perspective, right? So anyway, thanks again, Brandon. Appreciate your participation, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, everyone. Please, Supervisor, reach out anytime if I can be helpful. I'll be there.
All right, thank you, Brandon. We will
Thank you
definitely
all.
do that. We'll take you up on that. Probably a presentation to the full board. I think that's already in the planning stages. So yeah, very good. Okay, so
All right,
with that,
thank you.
I'm gonna
Bye-bye,
move on
everybody.
Okay, bye, Brandon. I'm going to move on to number 5, Supervisor Communications. I think most people are aware of the fact that we did receive the emergency declaration from FEMA for the assistance of the general FEMA support, and that would include things like trailers, as I understand it, but we did not have what's called the individual assistance, the IA part of it. And so we're working with all the fire agencies and FEMA to try to get them persuaded that with the 1,000 homes that have been lost, that it does fit that individual assistance. And the primary benefit of that is for people who live in the Grizzly Flat area or one of the other areas that's probably not national forest land, because if you're on federal land, that's a separate consideration of how all that works in terms of the cleanup. But for those people who lost everything without insurance, it might provide them enough money through the federal government to start rebuilding their lives. Because without that, a lot of them lost their livelihood, they've lost their home, and they've got nothing. They didn't have insurance because insurance is expensive. So they weren't able to carry it. So that individual assistance is very important. And so based upon reading the pulse of what was going on, our CAO asked if the board would move forward now in submitting a letter to the President of the United States requesting that he endorse the full individual assistance if FEMA were to come forward with a recommendation not to provide that assistance, that we'd already, promoted that within the White House, and hopefully things were lined up. We did that by talking to our Washington consultant and making sure that the letter that was submitted and everything was consistent with what they believed was good practice. And so I'm pleased to announce that we now have Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla signed up, and they're sending the president the same kind of message that the Kaldor Fire victims need to have individual assistance made available to them. So we're kind of hoping that should FEMA go forward, the president will overrule it and say, no, I believe it's justified. We need to provide that individual assistance. So that's what that first article is about. It's probably the only letter a board of supervisors has ever written to the president of the United States as directed by the board, as opposed to an individual. But hopefully it pays dividends. So we'll just have to wait and see how that determination is made. We were told that sometimes it can take up to like 3 or 4 months, and we've been, I think, about a month running. So we might be a little on the front end of it, but it's never too early to try to, persuade. That's what it's all about. Influence people who have the stroke of the pen to make it happen or not happen, that it's in the best interest of constituents that are out here to make sure that individual assistance is provided. So we'll continue to track it. And once that determination is made, I'm sure it'll be a press release. And so we'll put it out in various forms through the county social media contacts and try to spread the word. So that's what that one's all about.
Mr. Heidel?
Yes.
Is there a unique criteria that's linked to the individual assistance?
There is. They go through and they evaluate the number of total homes lost. And my understanding is we are at that margin, but it's close because in general, if I understand it right, you have to have 1,000 or more. And last count I saw was 1,003. Maybe it's a little bit up from there, but we're right on that margin where it becomes more of a discretionary. It's borderline. Does it go in or does it go out? So that's why we decided getting ahead of the game and submitting the letter to the White House was the right thing to do, and getting the senators from California signed up should help. So we'll just have to wait and see, but I can only imagine how difficult it is for the fire victims in Grizzly Flat in particular, who have basically only the car they're in, maybe, because they were evacuated with short notice and everything else burned, right? They've lost everything. And if they didn't have insurance, which my understanding is somewhere between 40 and 60% of the people that lived in that area probably didn't have insurance. And that's based upon the experience that was up in Butte County with the Camp Fire up and particularly in Paradise. So the numbers in Paradise were something like 65% of the people that lived there did not have fire insurance. So we're assuming it might be a similar number. And I've heard our estimates internally is from based upon having our assistance center that might be like 40%. So it's probably somewhere in between 40 and 65%. Say roughly half probably don't have any form of insurance. The other thing I'll share with you on that is I do know of some people who did have insurance. They took the insurance money and they've left the state. We seem to see some of that happening in significant numbers. And this is coming from our Environmental Management Council. The difficulty with that is if they abandon the property and stop paying their property taxes and stuff, then it becomes the county's responsibility to finish any cleanup that's there. And you can sell the property at auction, but I'm not sure what that would bring at auction. A clean site's worth something, but how much, I have no idea. So anyway, there's a lot of dynamics involved with this stuff, and more as time goes on, we'll see. So
Does the issue of property being on Forest Service land come into play there?
it does. If you have a lease with the Forestry Service, one of these old cabins that's been up there for years and years, and typically they're 99-year leases. And the Forestry Service typically would rather get rid of people having those cabin rights. They're just waiting for that time limit to burn out. But when a fire happens, what I've seen happen from some friends of ours' perspective who experienced it down near Yosemite, the Forestry Service came in and said, okay, you got to clean up everything that was here that was yours. It's got to look almost like it was pristine when the day you started building construction on this. Take out all your residual stuff. You know, you got to tear down the brick, you got to tear down the foundation, restore it to natural, but we're not going to let you rebuild on it. Because your lease is, you know, you're 70 years into your lease and we're not going to let you rebuild. And, you know, because then you're going to want to negotiate a new lease and we're not going to go there. So that's what happened to them down near Yosemite several years ago. So I suspect the same thing may be happening to a lot of the individuals, but we really don't know. Environmental management has been talking with the Forestry Service to try to figure out what recommendations we can provide to people. Would you recommend that they apply for the right of entry for Cal OES to come in and do the cleanup? And I'm not sure the state's going to come in and do cleanup on federal lands. My guess is probably not, but I don't know. So there's a lot of things going on there that we haven't determined what is going to happen with those particular properties. But I guess the good news is it was the fewer number of the 1,000, because I think the impact in Grizzly Flat alone was somewhere like 600 in that broader area. And so the other 400 are along Highway 50 primarily, and some of those communities where they did have federal land permission, you know, the long 99-year leases for the property. But my guess is it's going to be difficult to get anything rebuilt there, but then the cleanup's got to still happen, right? So more to come on all those details as we get into it. Okay, the second thing I had here was Serrano A14 project was 3-2 vote. And one of the things that I think people need to understand is the plan development activity relative to the way the zoning ordinance is written. And actually next month, I'm asking somebody from the county to come down and kind of explain that. I mean, John Davey understands it beyond APAC and a lot of other people do, but one of the advantages of a plan development is the developer is required to provide 30% open space. And that open space can be used for recreational uses where you build a trail and build some benches and go revert to nature. It can be used for just wildlife habitat. But the key thing is it's maintained open space because it's through an HOA, which means the fire hazard shouldn't be there. And I'm not sure we can say that about all of the Serrano HOA maintained open space, but by design, it should all be maintained, which means it's got its grass clearances and, you know, low fire risk, et cetera. But it provides a continuation for wildlife to habitat a given community as opposed to a few birds that are in the trees in somebody's backyard. So that's the trade-off in large measure is you get more open space in a concentrated area that can be used by the community as opposed to houses distributed everywhere. And the offset there is you're allowed to go to a higher density. And that's the way it's written. And you can either approve those things or not approve those things. But with the case of Serrano, that was a 1988 project. They were granted all those entitlements. It's not like Central El Dorado Hills, which is a new proposal. I mean, that's a general plan amendment. It's a specific plan amendment. It's a zoning amendment. It has nothing similar to do with 814 other than Parker's name's tied with it. But the public somehow just doesn't seem to grasp that open space. Part of my campaign commitment was to preserve open space. In this case, we're actually creating open space that I think is more usable. So you can weigh in or weigh out on it, but I think the public needs to understand there are trade-offs the way these zoning provisions are put in place. And if people are against the PD because they don't want a lot of open space or more open space than we have currently defined, maintained open space, then that's fine if that's what we want to do. But that discussion needs to happen. So that's what that one's all about, to try to share that information and make people aware of what it really means, because everybody talks about you just allowed more homes. Well, yes, clustering does that, but it provides some offsetting things that can be as favorable as fewer homes. It all depends on the traffic situation, a lot of other things. So a lot of variables. So I'm open to have that discussion. Absolutely, absolutely, exactly the same thing. Provided open space, it was going to be maintained, and I happen to be a wildlife fan. I mean, that's where I live. Is we got all kinds of wildlife all over the place. We got deer, we got turkey, we got skunk, we got raccoon, we got everything, right? I like that. Some people don't, I guess, but I think you have to look at where does the wildlife go when all the developments go in? They're forced out of the area unless you have these kinds of trails and stuff. And ideally you have a connected area where these open space zones provide connectivity. So it's a whole range of different developments that provide, basically a highway, if you will, for the wildlife to move back and forth to various areas. I don't think it ever gets that orchestrated, but it could be. So that's the comment about A14. So I guess I should ask, anybody have any questions on that? Because again, hopefully we'll have a discussion next month on it, so it's a little bit better understood by all. So yes, Maria.
A lot of the protests against Serrano A14 center around how it's going to be a fire trap with all these houses so close together. There's noise about 3-foot setbacks between houses. And gosh, if one house burns, won't they all burn? And
Yep, just comment on that. Sure. I think new residential construction as of 2011 is fully sprinklered with residential fire sprinklers. So in the aspect of this, the setbacks are reduced in that the houses are closer together, but the threat of fire then is also mitigated by the building construction features. So the stucco on the exterior of the walls of the houses is thicker, multiple layers to help prevent that spread. You have different types of glass, and then you have the residential fire sprinklers. So I don't, specific to the houses being closer together, it's a valid concern for people to have, but it's more valid concern to have in an unsprinklered house versus a new house that is built with the modern safety features.
so we can say that A14 is not a fire trap.
Fire marshal, the fire department has to review every one of these projects to make sure that there's no new conditions. So environmental conditions or whatever that might change the original decision that was made. And if there is, then we need to go back and revisit that with a proper environmental analysis. And my understanding is the determination that was made by the fire department is that this is not unlike not every other, but a lot of other proposed subdivisions that they've had. And it looks like Chief Johnson would like to speak to this. So I would welcome him to help me here.
Make sure this is on. Good evening, Mo Johnson, Fire Chief, Eldorado Hills Fire Department. To say it's a fire trap, no, that's not an accurate depiction of what's being proposed. We've had staff that's been involved every step of the way and certainly have given some comments, some feedback, and there have been some changes based on that feedback. As a fire trap, no, just like Chief Lilienthal said, with the inclusion of fire sprinklers, the large majority of fires, I think it's 98, 99% of them with sprinkler buildings have been contained with 1 or 2 sprinklers. So is it a fire trap? No. Are the buildings closer together that presents an opportunity for exposures, meaning fire outside of the main building? Yes. Is it any more than any of the others? No. I think if you look between 3 feet and 6 feet, that doesn't give you that much more of an appreciable difference as well. So is it a fire trap? No. Is it a concern? Absolutely, because they are closer together. That just presents more access problems, getting hose streams in between and those types of things rather than the actual exposure.
Could you explain the Uniform Fire Code in about 30 seconds in terms of why we follow those kinds of standards? Because that's supposed to be what everybody signs up to, right?
Wow. I'll give it to you in 3 seconds. How's that?
Okay, that's fine.
The Uniform Fire Code, we follow the Uniform Fire Code because that is more universally adopted and approved. Now, obviously, we have the ability and the right as a fire department to adopt more stringent codes, more strict codes, and we do take those opportunities from time to time, but we do follow the Uniform Building Code.
What I'm trying to say, it's not a random event. There is a Uniform Fire Code. We look at those locally, and we can establish more stringent things where we think conditions prevail. And I know we have done some of that in the past, not often, but we have done a few of those types of things.
Sure, we call those alternate means. So
there you go.
If there's not, say you're going to circumvent the code, but if there is a problem with construction that's going to present an issue for us, we do explore alternate means. And what an alternate means is you have to come up with something different that will mitigate that risk or eliminate that risk sufficiently to the fire service liking, and we can look at that. It's not an automatic by any stretch of the imaginations. For instance, if we're talking about turnarounds, and you're talking about a secondary structure, we might require sprinklers in that secondary structure, or even sprinklers in the attic, which normally would not be required based on fire flow, based on the ability to turn around. So there are things that we can look at that give residents more time to get out of the home, that we can say, okay, that's a reasonable accommodation, and we do make those from time to time. But we never ever just say, don't worry about that portion of the code. You don't have to worry about that. There's always an alternate means that is equal or more stringent than what was being asked for.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Okay, so with that, I'm not seeing any other questions, and I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised on Zoom. So let's move on to the redistricting. I think most people are aware there's 4 different alternative redistricting maps that have been distributed. They're asking for comments on those as you may have them. I've had several conversations with different people emphasizing different things, but I'm not sure that that's going to, ultimately influence the results here. But I want to make people aware of the fact that we don't have to select one of those 4 maps or nothing. I mean, we have to pick something. And it could be derivative of one of those 4 maps. It could be something that's a little different than one of those 4 maps. But the sooner that comes available for consideration, the better the socialization, the community can weigh in on, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it's important to recognize that our next redistricting meeting is October 14th at 6 p.m. And that will be both done in person and with Zoom. So it'll be in the board chambers and Zoom connectivity.
I don't know if they clarified if it's going to be on the board change.
I thought we said it was going to be, but okay.
I'll double check.
Okay. If it's not, then it's Zoom, but I was hoping that we would have it in the board chamber. Somewhere I thought I read it.
I'll put it on the
was
link
agreed
too
to.
for
Okay.
on the
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah. For clarification. So my encouragement is anybody who has some version of a map that they think is significantly different than the 4 that are out there, and there's a reason for justification of that map, that they try to put something together and get it submitted before the 14th, because we're going to have a little bit of time for a committee then to look at it and bring it forward as here was an alternate approach that was taken, and the pros and cons. So it gets that additional map might be part of that discussion then, the 4 plus an additional 1 or additional 2 or whatever it is. So if you have specific desires relative to redistricting, then I think now is the time to make them known, because as we get further down this line, recognizing by December 15th, the decision has to be made by the Board of Supervisors. We're in that short time frame where things don't normally turn around very quickly, but they have to in this case. So public comment is going to be restricted at some point. So you got to get in the game early if you're going to have a voice in it. So that's what the encouragement on that is. So any questions on redistricting? Yeah, I'm going to take Stephen first, and then we'll come back to you, Maria. Yeah, aren't we all?
Hopefully, yes. I'm curious, more a question for John Davey. Is Bass Lake Action Committee going to come out with any kind of a paper about this? Or any of the other homeowner associations coming out with papers so we can look at it?
The timing on that's funny for us because, we meet quarterly as a board. We have had a lot of our members go, what's going on? We did put a special Bass Lake bulletin, just an email notification out, where we are concerned because the east side of Bass Lake Road is proposed, and I think 4 different alternatives to not be in District 1 anymore. There's a lot of people in Dorado Hills. We all can't be in one district. But our concern is that where is the commonality with us being in a district with Garden Valley or Georgetown or Somerset or Grizzly Flat? And we're not saying that a representative, a supervisor from any one of those areas couldn't represent us or wouldn't understand what our concerns are as a community in El Dorado Hills. And we're not saying that if my neighbor ran from Bass Lake and had to represent Garden Valley or Georgetown, they couldn't do it. But we are saying that there's some commonalities, that the intent of this is to communities of interest, natural sort of groupings of cities, CSD, we're even in the CSD alternative, and we're in the CSD, we're left out of that for the Bass Lake area. So we'll have something to say. It's a challenge to get it done in basically another week. I did put a post on Facebook because we had a lot of questions about it. And I put it on the El Dorado Hills Community Facebook. It's an El Dorado Hills Community Discussion Facebook group. And there's 6,500 people in that group. 53 people responded. One person chose alternative one chose alternative 3, one chose alternative 4. 50 people chose an alternative that I suggested, where El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park should be combined and then split in some dividing line, so that you have sort of two suburban districts addressing, because that's where our population centers are, addressing those suburban concerns and needs.
So just as a comment to add to what you're saying, if I may, I live down there in Heritage.
Yes.
I call it the reservation, but there's a whole lot of people who've moved in there that have no idea they're in El Dorado County. They still think they're in Sacramento County.
Yes.
Or they think they're in the city of El Dorado Hills.
Exactly.
They have no idea what's going on. And so I can't have a conversation with 4 or 5 of them and pick out and do things because they had no clue. So what I'm asking here is if there's some meeting going on anywhere with anybody, I would love to know about it, maybe help out or do whatever.
We're going to miss an opportunity because our next board meeting's not until November, but we're trying to effort a group of like our elected officers to get something down on paper that we can submit as a concern. I'm hoping we can get that done. And if we could reach out to other members of the community, because I'm not saying it has to be a Bass Lake focus. I just, it's our community.
It could be
focus.
Serrano Homeowners Association, and I know Cindy lives there, and maybe they have something going on that we don't even know about.
Yeah. Well,
Not that we've seen in our office. So.
and that's a point, is that a lot of people don't even know we're doing it, right? They don't know that it has to be done.
Right.
And as you mentioned, a lot of people always ask me, why didn't the CSD fix our roads? Well,
So I'm gonna throw it back at John though. Your meeting is October 13th, right?
our APAC meeting's
Yes.
October 13th. Yes.
So is APAC a potential place you would discuss that? Because the timing is
I'm
right
looking-
before the October 14th
I
meeting.
know, and I'm looking across the room, and we'll talk about APAC in a minute. I don't know that we have, as a group, APAC officers or elected members have adequately sussed this out.
That's fine.
And the challenge is that, that census data came out a little bit earlier than we anticipated, but a lot later than it normally is.
Mhm.
And so when I was looking at the mapping tools back when the mapping tools first became available, where do you start? Because you just don't know the census numbers. You know what the old numbers are.
Yeah.
And anything I would have drawn from that would have been pointless, because that's not what the reality is now with where the communities line up. District 2 grew, District 1 grew, other districts did not. So
I will tell you, Steve, that the chamber contacted our GIS organization, actually contacted our office and asked for population within 95762.
yeah, I have that.
Understand that. So there is an interest, at least from the chamber, of looking at how you would divide El Dorado Hills into at least 2 districts with the 95762 a theme, I guess, kind of central to that, because that's what a lot of people use to define where they are, right? I'm in 95762, that's El Dorado Hills. Even though you may not be within the boundaries of the fire department or the CSD, you're 95762. But that also brings up the question I've seen from various people of, hey, if I get redistrict out of District 1, does that mean our zip codes change? The answer absolutely is no. The answer, honest answer is absolutely not. Zip code determination is a federal postal determination, right? So redistricting is going to have no effect on zip codes, because there's people that are concerned that if I'm over here, I could have my zip code changed to something else, right? No. So you have to separate kind of the redistricting from other things.
If APAC were to take on a discussion about this for maybe 30 or 40 minutes and have a half a dozen people weigh in on it, we may not come to any conclusion.
Oh, yeah.
We may think it's just frustration, but at least we had the conversation.
And the challenge is the timing. Our meeting's the
Thank
day
you.
before the.
I hear you.
And to your point too about zip codes, a lot of people have asked that too. What do you mean I'm gonna live in Cameron Park now? It's like, well, no, but how it's represented and what our interests are as a community in terms of how we address concerns and matters and issues and growth and all those fun things.
How did we, do we know the history on how we came up with 5 districts? And is there an option to add a district,
You'd
to,
have to have 2. You have to be odd.
oh, they have to be odd.
Yeah,
Right,
the
for a
only,
majority.
as I recall,
charter.
but the only county that has more than 5 districts, I think, is San Francisco County. And they have like 9 because they're special. But I don't know of any other county, particularly a rural county, that has more than 5
Well,
supervisors.
because we have such diverse communities. So,
The real question is, for instance, if you're looking at El Dorado Hills, divide El Dorado Hills into 2 district representation or 3. And then it gets down to, if you're going to go 3, how do you divide those up? And what proportion of the population? You want an equal proportion of the population in each of those or not, which we're at the not at this point with the current districting.
So is it within your jurisdiction if you wanted to say add 2 districts? Could you do that?
No.
Create 2 new districts
We
from
would,
nothing.
we would have to probably go through the charter review to make all that happen. You're talking long term. It's not going to happen before
Right,
December.
it won't happen as part of this purview.
And I'm guessing that there wouldn't be a lot of support for doing that. But I could be wrong.
You get a chance in 10 years. Right,
Well,
that's the next.
If it's
Information.
difficult to get
Do you have a question?
a vote on with 5 supervisors, how much more difficult is it with 7 or 9 or Maria?
Well,
Mine is a swirl. I understand the zip code.
Yep.
I understand we're not going to become Cameron Park. I understand that of all the scenarios, in my opinion, Bass Lake belongs with Cameron Park. But it's also that scenario that moves me out of District 1 into District 4. So suddenly it's like, what?
Yeah.
What? Okay, then let's just summarize it by saying, we go to District 4 and we're not going to be attending these meetings. We're going to be listening to Supervisor Harlan. And that is really uncomfortable. I don't know her. When I say uncomfortable, I don't understand what's ahead for us. And that makes me feel, me personally, very uneasy. I mean, you're just picking us up and dumping us somewhere else. Yes.
Well, and I think I might have talked to Maria once about it, maybe on next door, but in the alternative where Bass Lake and Murray Homestead Park and Highland Hills is all part of District 4, the top of District 4 becomes District 3, which is Placerville, and there'd be 200 and something residents from El Dorado Hills in District 3.
So I will say the one thing that's consistent with all the maps is that the El Dorado Hills Business Park is all part of District 1. And I think that's a natural thing because there's no population there. So you're not picking up population. It made no sense to me when I became a supervisor to have our business park split between 2 districts. Because if you're really promoting growth and economic development, all those kinds of things, the business park is a key aspect of that. And to have it split just didn't seem to be appropriate. But you can argue it, I guess, either way you want. Tim?
To Steve's point about APAC doing something, John and I and other officers of APAC discussed whether this would be an appropriate topic for October 13th APAC meeting. Ultimately, I sort of suggested that, it's not really our mission statement. It's, I mean, I want to get the community educated on redistricting.
It's not.
It's a very important issue, but APAC focuses on development in both residential and business development in El Dorado Hills. To go off on redistricting, and that can become very, very political, then it sort of taints what we try to do, and that's to stay very neutral and looking at development and going through the process. And I know John will address fire
Well,
and will address development.
And my counter argument, it happens once every 10 years.
Yeah.
Is it a special case or not? I don't know. But I'm, I guess, a little discouraged that there is no community conversation on this. There's stuff out there in social media and you get all kinds of things out there, but there is no community discussion on it, which I think should happen. But who sponsors that?
Yeah.
Whoever steps up to do it is going to be attacked for something, right? Collusion or whatever. So.
But Maria, to your point though, the El Dorado Hills Community Council is for all of El Dorado Hills. It goes to all of 95762, no matter what district you're in. So it goes to 1, 2, and 4. So all of them.
Information
They
questions?
actually watch it online.
Is there,
Well, okay, so we're on that subject. Cindy told me there were 300 views of the YouTube video
From last month's meeting.
From
last month's meeting.
So they watch it.
So a lot of people don't want to attend. If they Zoom, they do, but otherwise they'll cherry pick stuff, I guess, out of the particular YouTube and listen or watch what they want to watch. And that's it. And that's fine, as long as they're getting part of that communication. But the advantage to me of this kind of a format is there's interaction as opposed to a newsletter, which are what the other supervisors are doing. And I'm not saying that's unsuccessful, but that's a one-way push. It's not an interaction.
The challenge for the other supervisors too is the size of the district.
Right.
How do you get somebody from Georgetown, Garden Valley to a meeting in, well, maybe in Tool might happen.
You do it
or-
on Zoom.
Yeah.
That's the way you have to do it, unfortunately. You can't do it in person anymore, so. Okay,
Are the 4 district maps online at the
Yes.
county site?
yes.
And that's the first question. Second question is, what general, I hate to say it, social media platform has probably had the most discussion on this so far?
People are, we posted the Bass Lake Action Committee Bass Lake Bulletin, which is a sheet with just details about when the next meeting is, what the alternatives are, where you should see the maps. And we did that on Nextdoor. I did this survey that I put on Facebook on the, 6,500 members of the community. I figured it's a fair representation. I hesitated to put it on Nextdoor just because the vitriol would be so significant. I might put it back on just to see if maybe we can get some traction, just people paying attention.
Was there a Facebook thing? What's the title of that?
I'm not telling you. Are you my friend? No. I just think I titled it El Dorado Hills Residents, and just I laid out the options for. In fact, I did get this sheet since I heard that the chamber has it, and I shared this sheet too that breaks out how many residents in each alternative go into each district. Goes alternative 4, which makes the most sense for me. I'm in Bass Lake, but then you end up with 214 El Dorado Hills residents in District 3, 7,000 in District 4, 900 in District 2, and 38,000 in District 1.
Is that the best way to split it up? I don't like that one personally, but that's my opinion. Everybody's got an opinion. The bottom line number is if you look at the El Dorado Hills population of what we would consider, this is not 95762. This is the community region definition of El Dorado Hills. It's 46,000. And we have to get each district down to around 38, 39,000. So you're talking about needing to separate 8,000 people out of what is the El Dorado Hills community region area and put them into a different district. And Cameron Park is a natural one to do with that because it's right adjacent to where we are, right? So you could argue, yeah, everything on the east side of Bass Lake Road should become Cameron Park from the standpoint of districting, right? Should join Cameron Park and forming a new district. It doesn't become Cameron Park. So I'll take it back. I misstated it. But from the standpoint of where the representation is for a supervisor, that would be a logical approach to it. But then you still don't have the 38 to 39,000 you need there. So then how much more do you continue that? Shingle Springs has 4,090 people as the population within their community region. And it turns out they're all connected. And it's all along the Highway 50 corridor. That's not a surprise, right? So how far do you extend those kinds of philosophies before you really start totally changing what has been the previous matrix or representation for various regions? Because we have 2 very rural areas right now with the 2 districts. And that would have to change if you're going to use that type of philosophy. So it'll be interesting to see when we get into that further discussion. But I guess anybody who has real strong opinions on it, now's the time to either speak up or present a map because it's moving fast. So I think we probably ought to move on beyond this one. So let's go on to the next item. And this is kind of goes to Steve's question, the 2021-2022 final budget changes. And let me pull up the email here. So it turns out when the board had to make the decisions on the final budget stuff, we hadn't closed the books. So we didn't know the numbers. After the day that we were having the meeting, Joe Harns submits the data to us in an email in terms of what it was. So Joe Harns' numbers are, there's $23 million in excess fund balance to go into the 2021-2022 budget. So at the time, the board decided with all the things going on with Kaldor and stuff, we need to have a higher than normal general fund contingency. Normally the contingency is limited down to, I think it's typically running about 7%. But because of Kaldor and because of the excess money that we didn't recognize it was there 2 weeks before this happened, there was $6 million and adjusted general fund appropriations that went into the contingency, along with $8.5 million of Kaldor Fire response and recovery, excess property and sales tax from FY 2020 and 21. So there was $14.5 million total that was put into a contingency account for the supervisors to determine how that's going to be distributed. So more money can be put into roads, and it was mentioned that that is one of the key things on the list of priorities that might receive some of that reduction in contingency, because we need to get the contingency number down, I guess, is to a lesser amount, be consistent. But there were so many unknowns, we said, let's put it in contingency for right now to be redistributed once we have a better understanding of all the different things that are going on. So my guess is if this goes accordingly, the board might be able on a one-time basis say, okay, let's send $3 million additional to the road fund to get road work done, right? So now you got the 3 plus 1.5 plus 3 more. Now you're at $7.5 million in a one-time sprint that maybe get some of this stuff done. Is there any guarantee of that next year? No. Because if you look at the history in Butte County, Paradise, what happened? Their revenues were okay the first year after their wildfire, recognizing Kaldor is going to have an influence on this like everything else. The second year, they saw a significant reduction in their property tax and sales tax. And I expect we're going to see a significant reduction. And that's because property values, I don't believe, are going to be the same because of fire insurance. There's a lot of fire insurance companies right now that are leaving California. Sorry, we're done. We're signed off. We're leaving. We're not going to provide coverage in California. The fewer competition, fewer agencies that stay, the fewer choices people have. And what it really means is the California fund, the FAIR plan, is really the only alternative a lot of people who are in high risk fire areas are going to end up with, because their policies are going to be canceled if they can be canceled. Maybe some of you read stuff about what the fire insurance commissioner is doing, not fire insurance, but the insurance commissioner is doing, because he's established some criteria that says if you were within the affected zip code of where the fires occurred or an adjacent zip code, they can't cancel your policy within 1 year. And that protects a very small number of people. It doesn't protect El Dorado Hills. It doesn't even protect much of Camino because of the way the zip codes are laid out. Because when you look at where the Kaldor Fire boundaries were, we're not getting that protection in El Dorado Hills. And that's not well understood, but that insurance commissioner's direction doesn't protect people that are still at high risk from not being able to get their insurance coverage. And as that insurance coverage becomes more expensive, the value of the property, I think, diminishes. And particularly if you looked at areas that have been affected by the burn, I can't believe somebody wants to come in and pay market value, even for a piece of property that survived. Say Grizzly Flat, you got this home, it's beautiful, it's there, there's still some trees around it in the middle of that devastation. Somebody's going to pay the same market price for that property today that they would have paid a year ago? I don't think so. Market value will drop, property taxes will drop, is my opinion. Yep. Yep.
So when it burned down, they were just waiting to find out how many properties were burned down. The fire was still raging. He's already writing them down. And there's 1,000 of them, as you say, to figure that out.
The bigger impact, I think, is going to be in Tahoe, and maybe I'm dead wrong, but when you had a fire that got that close to South Lake Tahoe, and if the wind conditions had been slightly different, I don't think our firefighters would have been able to stop that. Maybe one of the two chiefs has a better opinion of that, but if we'd had very adverse wind conditions when it got close to Tahoe, I can see it could have taken all of South Lake Tahoe out. It'd be gone. Now, how many people are going to want to buy property from the Bay Area and South Lake Tahoe, recognizing there's that fire risk with high fire insurance? Is the market price of a property that's in pristine condition in South Shore going to be the same this year as it was a year ago? I don't think so, but I could be dead wrong, right? Because again, you're paying more in insurance, and you know that this is a potential area that with just a certain environmental condition called winds and other things could have gone. We know the history of the Angora fire, and there's been a lot of changes with FEMA and stuff, but I don't even think we're through this fire season by any sense of the word yet. We could still have another major fire incident in El Dorado County before we get to December, which is typically when you get enough rains, you can say, okay, it's done. Used to be the old date was November. I don't think that holds anymore. So, and going back to Oakland Hills, I think that was October, wasn't it? That the Oakland Hills fire happened? I don't remember. Yeah. So, you know, essentially fall weather, fall conditions, and you still have those kinds of fires. So we'll see. So that's the answer. A long story about what the excess funds are going to be used for. We have a substantial amount in contingency, and I would hope, in fact, Don Ashton recognized in his statement that ideally he would like to see another like $3 million go to the road fund and get some catch up done in that area. And I agree with him. So maybe it's more than that. Maybe it has to be less, but that contingency allows us to make that decision. So with that, I took an awful long time on those things. Any comments on that one? All right, let's move on to our leadership team progress reports, public safety. We always start with that. And I think, Alex, you're with us. So please share with us the sheriff's report for this last month.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Hi, good evening, Supervisor Heidel. I'm Detective Morton. I'm with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. I do have some numbers, some crime stat numbers to go over with you guys. We were quite busy, obviously, the month or so with the Kaldor Fire, but nonetheless, you know, our patrol division continued to be out there, and we maintain staffing in that regards. So for the pull this up here. So for the weeks of September 16th through September 22nd, we had a total of seven crime cases come out of El Dorado Hills. And the following week, 9/23 through 9/29, we had a total of 3 crime cases out of El Dorado Hills. Just to kind of, some of those included a few vehicle burglaries. Looks like we had a catalytic converter theft, a forgery, a drug case, and a theft from a business. So that's kind of an overview of what we experienced during those 2 weeks. Additionally, I just want to kind of point out, I know we have the holiday season kind of right around the corner, and you know, me and my partners in the property crimes division, we kind of always try to get together, and oftentimes we'll put together, you know, some sort of sting operations, as in using like bait cars or bait packages. In, you know, sometimes we've done it in town center, we've done bait packages around different neighborhoods. So we will likely be conducting some of those operations around the holiday season. And then we like to put out some information about that, you know, how to kind of mitigate the risks for folks. We put that stuff out usually on our social media page. So look out for that stuff too.
All right, very good. So do we have questions for Alex on the report, or anything anybody's aware of that?
Alex, I try to follow the sheriff's activity media log on the sheriff's website, and it seems to be sporadically updated. I presume you got your statistics from that log, but is that easily publicly accessible? I've tried to do it several times, a couple times very easily, and other times the information doesn't seem to be up to date.
I'll have to double check on that for you. I can tell you, sir, that you know, over the last month or two, we've transitioned to a new report writing system, and so a new report writing system and a CAD system, and it's all an integrated system. So it's been kind of a headache with transferring all of the data over from our old system into the new system. So for instance, you know, our crime mapping tool, it currently is not up and running. I've spoken with our IT department, and that's on their schedule to get that up and running. They're kind of more focused with getting the actual everything at the sheriff's office up and running, but that will be that should be up and running in the next month or two. I'll keep tabs on the IT department, our IT guys, to see where they're at with that, because I've gotten numerous questions about that. So that may be what that problem is, sir. If that persists, please let me know, and I'll get with our IT guys and see what the issues are. Also, I will update you guys here in this forum when we get that crime mapping tool up and running.
Thank you.
Any questions from members of the audience here? Seeing none. I'm not seeing any Zoom hand raised. So thank you, Alex. Appreciate the report. So hopefully our crime rates stay low and things continue with minimum interruption from the standpoint of where we've been. But appreciate your participation, and you're welcome to stay, but obviously I know you have other things to do. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. CHP, I don't see any of our CHP representation here, right? So let's go right to our fire report. Chief Lilly and Chief Johnson, both can chime in as appropriate.
All right. Yeah, Michael Lilienthal, Deputy Chief, and Chief Johnson as well will probably tie in a little bit. You mentioned earlier, and I think it's a valid point, the fire season is definitely not over yet. It started earlier and it's been intense, but we know that we're not out of the danger zone here in our area, and neither is Southern California. And now when the Santa Ana winds start picking up, usually starts to happen about now, and that continues on. We even had crews out during the Christmas holiday at one point. So we're hoping for a early wet season, and hopefully that'll help with that. But we'll see what happens. We've all had smoke in the air the last couple of days. There's been a lot of conversation. I see a lot of social media posts. A lot of that's coming from the two fires down to the south of us, the Windy Fire and the KNP complex. So both of those are right around the 95,000 acre mark. The Windy complex looking pretty good at 68% contained, but the KNP complex, and these are the big sequoia forest trees, is only 11% contained. That's around 70,000 acres. Matter of fact, we just sent a captain down as a strike team leader trainee yesterday. Strike teams have been going down there. So the requests are still kind of continuing for those activities, and we're continuing to support that mission. Our OES incident support unit, a command vehicle that supports big incidents, was gone for about a week at the Fawn Fire. They just returned. So we're happy about that. And then I realized as we're sitting here in October already, we're only about 60 days away from the Santa Run. So December 7th through the 11th, and we're full swing, and that's occurring. And
Is it going to be a Christmas this year?
We're doing Christmas this year.
Algie was just on. Are you going to have to be wearing masks? And no,
I don't know.
Let's don't go there. Let's don't go there.
We're hoping for just a great, happy holiday season and lift the spirits. And the purpose of the Santa Run is to collect food and toys. So that mission is very important to us. The other thing I was thinking about as we're talking about Kaldor is we know the next problem we're going to encounter during the winter, and hopefully have a wet winter, and it will be a problem, is the mud and debris flow. So the issues are already well known that this topography is very steep, and we know the amount of fire devastation that mud and debris flow and issues that will arise for the county, as well as for the fire agencies, and the traffic issues that will occur in the roads. It'll definitely be a real problem we'll be facing. So something on everybody's radar to keep alert to. With that, Chief, you got any additions?
Just one. And it's really just to highlight, our firefighters again, who I think are amazing. But even in the Kaldor Fire, a number of our firefighters and their families were also impacted. They were evacuated, and so they were still coming to work and doing those types of things as if nothing was going on at home. But a lot of them were evacuated for a long period of time as well. So I just want to highlight them because they work their tails off. They do a great job for this community. At the same time, they're personally impacted. That's it.
Can you give us an update on the proposed annexation, just so the public knows from this perspective of what the fire district is attempting to do here?
Sure. So we've been talking with Rescue for a number of years, 8 to be exact, a little bit more than that, about a potential annexation. We've had a shared services contract in place, like I said, for 8 years, by which we really manage every aspect of that organization and provide them with administrative and operational support. So we are looking at a full annexation. We're studying that. We're to the point where both agencies have adopted letters of intent. And we're exploring moving to the next step, which is an actual application. That's not definitive at this point, but that's certainly something that we're considering based on the economic climate, the operational, gaps that will be filled by the two of us coming together, and then also the fire service sustainability, in which the county, the grand jury, and several other reports have indicated. So we're looking at that. But I think at the crux of it is to make sure that we're not degrading the service that's provided here in the core in El Dorado Hills. That's number one.
Yep. I'll just mention the application goes to LAFCO. It doesn't come to the county. Local Agency Formation Commission, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's made up of 2 members, the Board of Supervisors, 2 members from city councils in El Dorado County, 2 members from special districts in El Dorado County, and 1 public member who's appointed by those other 6 individuals. So it's not just the county that weighs in on it. It's a mix of representation of various organizations and stuff that serve the county in different capacities to determine what has to happen relative to that annexation, that basically the terms and conditions associated with the annexation. But I'm looking forward to that discussion, because I think having been involved with those discussions going back 25 years ago with certain people wanting to annex to rescue, I think it's time to bring it forward and get it in a formal application and make it happen or not, right? Whatever the decision is. But I think now is the time to consider it. So particularly with the fire risks seem to be increasing every year, the more consolidations of resources and the closer working, even though you have the commitment now and you have, kind of the joint leadership.
Sure.
Whenever you consolidate a district, you're going to get better, I think, cooperation and services. It just raises you one more level in terms of that teamwork that goes on. So.
Right. I agree. I think the big piece is just making sure that financially it's sustainable for us in the future. And that's the big part. We're willing to look at anything that makes sense, that fills an operational gap, an administrative gap, a financial gap, but at the same time, it's got to make sense to our citizens as well.
Right.
I think we've maximized the efficiencies that we can gain from the shared services agreement. There's no additional efficiencies unless we do a full annexation. So that's where we're at right now.
And the county has stepped up conceptually
Yes.
at the committee level to provide some upfront capital funding, basically some monies upfront that diminish over time very quickly. But it's to get the startup established and stuff based upon the discussion. So we'll see how those conceptual things develop and what they become. But thanks for that update. Appreciate it. Okay, any questions of our fire service? All right, seeing none. Why don't we start from the bottom of the list this time? Let's start with community information and outreach and work backwards.
I gotta look it up. Just a second.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. It's in my.
If I surprise you,
I
we
just
can.
put it in my phone.
Okay.
Okay. We're doing the holiday season is coming up, so there's a lot of fun fall activities in El Dorado Hills. Let me look at my phone here. October 4th through the 31st, it continues. The farmers markets continue every Sunday at Town Center, which is a really neat activity. On October 8th, they had to reschedule the Love and Kindness concert. It's a really good band hit service. So that's this Friday at the El Dorado Hills CSD Community Park. That's a lot of fun. On October 9th and 10th, the Hands for Hope is going to do a fall festival at El Dorado Hills Town Center. They have all kinds of activities for kids. They have mazes and hay rides and all kinds of fun things going on. October 13th, we discussed an Apac meeting is coming up. On October 23rd, at the El Dorado Hills CSD pool, they're going to have a pumpkin splash patch. Kids will go in their swimsuits. They dive and get their pumpkins, and then they get to decorate them. So that sounds like a neat activity. And also at the CSD, they're going to have their annual Scarecrow contest. You have to have your Scarecrow in by October 22nd, and then they're going to, on October 29th, they're going to be doing their judging on who's going to win that, and they will present that during their trunk or treat event, which is another super fun event for kids. They're actually looking for people to volunteer. You open up your trunk of your car, you decorate it, and you hand out candy to the kids. It's a really neat event. And that's it.
You want to mention the volunteer committee and commissioner get together? We're trying to get scheduled, finalized.
Oh, for all of the District 1 commissioners.
Volunteers, right?
Yes, just the volunteers. Our El Dorado Hills commissioners. We're going to have a little fall festival get together on October 18th.
Okay, so we've got the facility all taken care of. Okay, good. All right, so
It'll come out and that, the invite will come out.
excellent. So let's go to APAC.
Why don't we? Our APAC meeting is next Wednesday. It's 7 p.m. And as far as I know, it's here in this room. We did reserve the room. We were challenged this month. This is a funny time of year because there are a lot of projects that are in motion and then progress stops, and there's not much for us to talk about in terms of additional review or more feedback that we're providing. We had anticipated that maybe we would not be having a meeting in October, but our Secretary, Brooke Washburn, presented an option that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'd always thought it would have to fit into an existing meeting. We're going to do a review process of what project approvals look like to us as far as APAC, how we get notified, how we use tools like Legistar, eTrackIt, the CEQA process, mitigated negative declarations versus an EIR, the draft EIR, the entire process that we look at for that, and then just have a discussion, because what we found is more people pay attention when big projects come up. They don't know the process, and it's not to say that we're all volunteers. We probably don't know the full process, but we know how we approach it. So what we're going to do is present a general overview of how we process a project and how things become notified and how the community can participate in terms of they don't want to work on a project through APAC, how they can still provide comments to the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, and just how to be aware and be involved and know what's coming. So if we can squeeze in a little talk about redistricting at the end, I think it'd be more to the point about how people can continue to participate, because there's an additional meeting after the one on the 14th. So, but that will be here in this building. We'll also stream it via Zoom like we're doing now. So anybody who wants to be here and in person, we'd love to see you here. We'd love to get some more volunteers. And if you can't be here, tune in to Zoom, and look forward to seeing everyone then.
Very good. Thank you, John. Tim, is there anything you wanted to add?
Just that we want this to be very interactive. We're not out there to lecture. We want people to ask questions, because that's the whole purpose of this meeting.
Yeah.
As Brooke said in our email communications, she sees at these meetings that a lot of people, when you start talking about some details, they get a blank stare on their face. You can push them to fall asleep, right, or fall over. So we really want to answer the questions that the public has from the APAC perspective. I'm sure I'll say something wrong, and John Vagner, the planning commissioner, will say to himself, that's not how it works. But that's okay. But we want to get the information out there and see if people want to become interested, because as we all know, there are a lot of major projects coming up in Dorado Hills, and more people know about how the process works. They won't get as upset, but they have to be aware of what the timing is. A lot of times they come late to the game, and things are already so far down the process that little change can be made.
And to that point, a lot of people think that we approach projects looking how we can stop or change a project, and that's really not our focus. Is we're reviewing what's presented, and then finding the best, compromise. People have a right to seek entitlements for their property. Is it always appropriate? Maybe not. We'll provide that feedback if we don't think it is. But that still doesn't mean that their project might not get favorable review at the Planning Commission or at the Board of Supervisors, and a project will result. We just want to make sure that it's balanced and it has communities' concerns addressed, and that there's a good benefit for everyone.
Well said.
I just want to call you guys do a great job with the amount of time you put in. Those are big documents. I know you put a lot of time in to study them.
Those are big documents.
But it is appreciated, at least
They
by
get bigger
residents
every
here.
year too. I don't get that, but yeah.
Well, if you look at the Dorado Hills specific plan from 1988 and like the central from now, there's a signal, a short stack of paper versus, So we'll look forward to seeing everybody.
Okay, so with that, let's move to healthy communities. Sita.
Okay.
There you go.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to keep this brief. So I think everyone's aware that Governor Newsom signed a bill that will require student vaccinations for grades 7 through 12. It's going to be the term after a COVID-19 vaccine gains full approval from the FDA. So that's going to be ages 12 and up. Then the CDC, we know about booster shots. So Pfizer is the only brand manufacturer that's administering booster shots and approved for booster shots right now. And national pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, I think there's 80,000 or so locations across the US that will be administering those. They say side effects are similar to the first shots, fatigue and pain at the injection site. So check out the CDC website for more information on eligibility, but it's going to be, you know, over 65 years old, similar to the way they did the first rollout. People living in long-term care settings, people with underlying health conditions, people that live and work in high-risk areas. And they're going to be studying the Moderna and J&J, and once those get approved, they'll roll those boosters out as well. California vaccines administered so far is almost 50 million. And in El Dorado County, I found this kind of interesting that 6 of the 138 or 39 deaths are from fully vaccinated individuals. They don't share what the comorbidities or ages are, but that's interesting. And then in El Dorado County, fully vaccinated people, it's over 100,000. So that's 53.5% of the population here, and California is around 59. So the case rate is higher among unvaccinated people, which is 23.6 per 100,000, and or unvaccinated, then vaccinated is 6.8 per 100,000. So there's an NPR article from some scientists that are modeling what they will see, that the scientists that are working with the CDC and reporting to them. And they are seeing a steady decline of COVID cases, including the Delta variant through spring, from now through spring. And then I wanted to share a little bit. The Opioid Coalition has launched a monthly educational speaker series. And that's it's called CASE, C-A-S-E, Community Awareness Substance Use Education. It's the first Wednesday of every month, 12:30 to 1. And you just sign up. They have a website you can go to, which is edcopioidcoalition.org. And the goal is to break through barriers of stigma and the complexities of substance abuse. We know that oftentimes stigma is what prevents people from getting the care they need. And that's kind of all I was going to go into for now.
Okay, thank you, Sita. Do we have any questions from the leadership team on any of that? Questions from the audience? Not seeing any. I'm not seeing any hand raised. So thanks again, Sita. Appreciate the report. And so with that, let's go to good governance. And I picked one that I'm familiar with, but
Go ahead. You've got the topic.
When the President of the United States came out to tour the conditions going on with the Kaldor Fire, they did a helicopter flyover, evidently, and then there was a meeting with very limited invitations that was held down at Mather Airfield. And so Don Ashton, our CAO, and the sheriff got invited. Don cleared his calendar to go down to make sure that we were represented personally. The sheriff had other obligations, so he was not able to make it. So the good news is we had one very strong proponent for getting FEMA support. And Don asked the tough question about, you know, Mr. President, will you commit to us that we will get the major declaration for this fire? And he got the president to say yes. Now, that was not the individual assistance portion of it. The major declaration is a big part of it, but the individual assistance is the other part of it. So he got the president's commitment. They had, I guess, a brief interaction, all very positive. Some of that was reported in news media, but I just wanted to make sure that people understood the dedication of our CAO to step out and get this. He cleared his calendar. He went down there. They had to make a bunch of arrangements. Things were late in happening, but he delivered the message that I think needed to be delivered to represent El Dorado County, and that was very important. So I want to give him credit for doing what he did. I think that put us on the right path. And now if we can just get this individual assistance authorized by FEMA, then we've got everything we could possibly get out of it in terms of federal funding to support people. If we don't get it, then hopefully the president will see in his wisdom the need to go ahead and authorize it above the lack of a recommendation from FEMA, and it gets done. So I think we got all our eggs in the right baskets and trying to make it happen. And I just wanted to recognize Don for what I thought was stellar performance, given everything else he's got going on. He recognized that was a time and, place and time that he needed to be there personally and deliver the message, which he did very effectively. So Richard, on to you for other stuff.
Well, there've been a lot of individual elements of this meeting that have touched on the whole concept of good governance in terms of participation, finding information, and learning. And unfortunately, our attendance sometimes indicates that other people are too preoccupied or what have you. But one of the things I frequently find is tracking down the information is really the challenge. And there are pockets of good information if people know where to go and look. And that's why I asked, what had you put out there relative to the redistricting maps? I think trying to gather that together, and we have a fire board that meets, and not too many people seem to participate with that, and coverage, frankly, in the media is sporadic on that. And then there's CSD. So we have these pockets of community information happening, but we don't really have a good nexus for all of these things. If a citizen would like to know what's going on, he's going to have to hunt and peck. I have a contact list, a neighborhood watch contact list. It's about 70 to 80 people in the Ridgeview area. And I try to pull together fundamentally what neighborhood watch was all about. What's going on from a safety perspective. And I've been trying to use the sheriff's office database because they did list all the reports for the whole county, and I would pick out, but now that's kind of
Tougher to get. Yeah.
tougher to put together. So I feel the citizens' frustration in trying to peel back the layers of the onion to know what's going on, and not having a precise local newspaper. And I guess the Mountain Democrat is as close as we come, and the Village Life is in second, and they only have certain resources. So it's tough. It is really tough for the citizen who wants to know to learn. And that's just kind of my observation as that citizen.
And the county website doesn't make it easy to find things either. So I mean, there's
And
a
it
whole
changes it.
lot of things you have to work
County-
through.
You know,
Yeah.
the county website evolves over time too, because you're using different tools that sort of become antiquated and they move on to something new. There are projects on the APAC website where we link to the projects at the county website. Those documents don't exist where we can reach them anymore. Those links are gone. So then you got to go back through and you got to research them and find them. Frequently they'll be in Legistar and you'll have to go and then
Download it.
yeah,
edit it,
and that's what we've been doing is that whenever there's anything new on a project, we basically download all the documents. The intent originally was just to link to it so that people could link to a valid, good document in case there's a change. But it happens so often that those links break that now we just download it. And if it's a bad document, at least it's close to what it was presented. So,
And then when that doesn't work, it allows everybody to speculate on what they think it is and
Yeah.
put it out in social media, and that just overwhelms the facts.
and I will say, Sel's here in the audience tonight. Sel's at pretty much every meeting I ever go to. So it does end up in the Village Life. And
I read her stuff too.
I know.
mean, that's where
And
she
so I
my
would
best
also say
sources.
that you can subscribe to the Village Life. That is hyper local. So, and I get those emails every day of, on Tuesday, I'll have an email about what's going to be in the Village Life tomorrow. And so it's a good way to be somewhat informed. It's a valuable service that, it's local. We don't have enough of, but I appreciate what, like you said, it's there if people are going to go look for it, but
Hunt.
yes, they have to go look for it. So it's unfortunate.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Just a comment, particularly when it comes to planning. It would, people, when they go look for a project here, they don't know the appraisal number, they don't know the land development. But if it was listed under Old Golf Course, if it was listed under Vineyards, or if it was listed up on Green Valley when we had Generations, if you use the name that the developer is sort of marketing or the name most associated with what's happening in an area, it would really allow people to better access and better find it. Because again, if we're talking about the old golf course, type in old golf course, you're probably not going to get connected to the project documents for that project. But that would be a very simple way to get more people to more easy to find documents to look at.
And even if you have the right project name, if it wasn't entered consistently with what the project marketing name is, or, you know, if you're looking for something, I'll say Lennar, that's a bad example, but if, you know, it's Lennar, maybe it's not listed as Lennar, it's like Lennar LLC, if you're looking for an applicant name. Okay, if the way the data goes in is not consistent, it's almost impossible to find something. And yeah, if you don't know the APN, if you don't know, you know, frequently there's no address because it's a undeveloped parcel, there's no street address. If it's, you don't know the project number, or the project number structure changes from year to year. Used to be, you know, a PD 21, like for this year, but now there's other suffix or prefixes before that. So if you don't know it, you don't, it's just hunting.
So the best recommendation I have is sign up on the county subscription
Yeah.
for any development projects in El Dorado Hills, and then you look at the map. And once you see the mapping and say, oh, I know where that area is. Yeah, I'm interested in that. Then you look for every one of those things that bears that title and you got your connectivity. But to me, being a very visual person, if I can look at a map, I can determine pretty quickly, am I interested or not? Right? I don't need to read 100 pages. So that I think is the key for a lot of people. Once they see that original notification come out, look at the map and see if you're interested in tracking it by that name. And then you just log it and look. But,
and to belabor it, the fire departments, the GIS that you guys had with projects listed, that is a wonderful tool because it's hyper visual.
Yeah.
And you can look and drill in and say, oh, and it's outlined, or it's a project, click it, boom, you're there. The other thing too is that the planning department will frequently release a notification about a notice of a public meeting or a public hearing, and they'll tell you to look for the project and track it, and just give you the link to track it. Now you got to go figure out what it is and track it, how it's entered. And I can do it if I go through. I can append a URL and track it, and with a project number and get it. I don't know why the planning department doesn't do that. And now with Track It, you have to be logged in to actually see the documents. So you have to have a user, it's a free user account. So it's a little frustrating. We used to be able to link right to the county document, the page that had all the information about a project, and now it's a little bifurcated between different things.
to Tim's point, if you used old golf course, I'll remind everybody, the old golf course is 98 acres. That is a small part of the total, what is almost 400 acres or something or other proposed in the central El Dorado Pacific.
Yeah.
If you think that is the only part of central, you're very much misled, because there's a bigger project there that people need to understand all the rest of it if they're going to say, don't allow anything. Well, is that really right? I mean, I understand the golf course is separate and that's a distinct piece of it, but that's only 98 acres. So the relevance of it is important too. If you just catch a name, you tend to think that's all it is. And in this case, central, it's much more than that. Includes a Pedregal and everything else. It's the strip going down that direction still on the east side of El Rose Boulevard. So,
and it's also a fair point that the golf course hasn't been open since 2006 or 2007. How many people have moved here that have never known that it was a golf course? So that's, I live next door to them. Yeah.
but there's a lot of people that still remember it. So anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments on the good governance segment of this? And I'm not seeing any hands raised, so let's go on to infrastructure.
Planning Commission item, we have a new commissioner, Andy Nevis, who was appointed to District 4, replacing James Williams. James had to step down because his manager at his business found another job, so he had to recommit to his business. So we'll miss James, but welcome Andy. I'll be meeting with him tomorrow, so I look forward to that. And then on the agenda here, I may need some help from Supervisor Heidel since he came up with it. Traffic circulation considerations for the Town and Country Village project, which is at the corner of Bass Lake and Country Club. And you know, we don't have the environmental document out. We don't have the traffic analysis.
A6 presentation, as I understand it, is supposed to be October or November. I mean, it's not next month, it's not next meeting.
They have updated documents from when we talked to them was it last month? Can't remember. There are additional J6 documents in their presentation. And I sort of suspect my concern is looking at it as a Bass Lake resident is that the accessibility to the hotel part of the project is from Bass Lake Road between Country Club and US 50. Okay, we just went through 20 years of trying to get traffic away from US 50 for Country Club, and now we're talking about 2 or 3 new entrances.
Well, they're showing a right in, right out at the old Country Club alignment. And then their main access, well, again, we'll see when we get done with this project.
Yeah.
You know, where that's gonna be. I've got some concerns. I've got the, you know, what they put out. That's a nice presentation they put out. And so I've got some significant issues with access. I would say, I looked at the numbers, the latest traffic count at Bass Lake, and I think they're sitting around last year, you know, 13,400. And so I would say more than likely that section of Bass Lake Road from the highway up to the realigned Country Club is going to need to be 4 lanes, you know, based on what they would contribute.
That's the rural region. The Country Club is so level service E is your trigger. Then north of that level service F.
Well, it's not just a level of service F, it's just, you know, in respect to, you know, adequate access and circulation. So, you know, yeah, a couple of hotels at that corner, mixed use. So there's a whole lot going on there. So yeah, I'll be interested in that J6 hearing. You know, I've had a couple of meetings with the applicant as well. You know, we've had a lot of discussions about Bass Lake Road. I know the county is finally getting around to getting the signal off ramp at the eastbound off ramp. But again, they split up the project. It was originally widening and the signal. They split it up into 2 projects. So all you're going to get is the signal first and then the widening later. So, oh well, I'll leave that alone. So was there anything else, Supervisor Hyde?
It's primarily because a lot of people are concerned that Bass Lake Road is being ignored and all the traffic's going to compound and nothing's going to be done. The J6 is the start of a process that allows the developer to get feedback from the public and from the Board of Supervisors of what's in and what's not in. And it's going to be very clear that the traffic analysis has got to be thorough, and we've got to look at it from the standpoint of what are the requirements to put this in. Is it going to require 4 lanes at Bass Lake Road right off that segment all the way up to Country Club? My guess is yes, based upon that circulation. So the contractor, the proponents are going to be forced to figure out how that happens. So this is it's a general plan amendment and a rezone that has to happen.
Specific plan amendment.
It's a specific plan amendment as well. So actually it's got the same combination, I believe, as what Central has. There is no entitlements for this project right now in this part of it. Central has some entitlements and in part of what they want to do with the offsets for the open space, but that aside, this requires a thorough analysis and the board can decide this is inappropriate or appropriate without any implied entitlements, which is different than A14 going back to it. So you really need to understand what was previously committed versus what is open to discussion with mitigations being proposed that have to be proven to be sufficient before anyone, I would think, the vote would approve it. So traffic is always number one. That's why I put it on here to kind of introduce it for people who are not familiar with Town and Country, right?
Well, and they show one access off the Realigned Country Club. I think they're going to need more than one access. I would think their major access point should be coming off a Country Club, especially going to the new signalized intersection. And then we got to talk about, continuing to the west for the Country Club to continue. How's that going to work out with this project, with the proposed Costco project?
And part of the Bass Lake Hills specific plan is very triggered to them for weekend design work and then analysis on the interchange. Right. And when I talked to DOT, it was in 2020, I was up in Placerville and we sat down and they finally said none of the projects that are proposed right now would ever hit those triggers to even talk about design work. for analysis for the
Right.
interchange. And then they kind of hinted it would be subsequent project, like a phase 3, if there were any, or they said, or other projects outside the plan area, which would probably be Marble Valley. So.
Well, I remember similar projections on Saratoga, but I won't go there anymore.
Right, so part of the discussion coming up with this may be, does this go into the CIP or not? Is it all developer funded? Is it reimbursable? All that conversation that has to happen is this project, if this project moves forward. But the J6 is the first real opportunity for the public to get a glimpse of it. I mean, I appreciate the APAC review, but J6 will have feedback from the public and feedback from the Board of Supervisors. So if you want to get a better appreciation for what's being proposed and what has to happen before it will, anything will ultimately be approved, that J6, I think, review is a good learning tool because it is a major project. It's not a significant, I mean, it's not a diminutive type situation where they want to come in and do what, 2 hotels to start with, okay? On-site accommodations for all of the workers there, mixed use.
1,200 dwelling units.
Right, connectivity of trails to be historical in nature. I mean, there's a lot of things that they have proposed, so.
There are a lot of things that are benefits, and there are a lot of things that will need to be mitigated.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
is it appropriate?
One last thing, I actually saw it on the news today, it was on the TV, announcing Malcolm Dixon Road being shut down for a period of time for the improvements, you know, to connect over, and they mentioned Malcolm Dixon cutoff. So down to Green Valley, you know, as part of the
That went out as a
developments.
press release from the county, so.
Yeah, for the developments that were approved, the vineyards and the other projects and stuff to get that major work on. That's going to be a great relief for Malcolm Dixon to get people directly out on the Green Valley Road, so. Malcolm Dixon, that section for a good 6 months, from what I heard, so. So that's all I got, unless there's any questions.
Questions from anybody?
On the vineyards, the school building, is it coming down? Somebody had said it's coming down, so I don't know.
I'll find out tomorrow. I'm meeting with somebody concerning that, so.
My understanding is the property is up for sale that they.
The school building?
No, the whole property, the vineyards
yeah, yeah.
property.
Well, we had
Which
had a
includes the
discussion, I
school.
want to say back in April that
So I wouldn't think they'd do anything till they had a new buyer.
a sale was pending, but I think the county was making the determination of whether the building could be repaired.
Oh,
I had heard that it was.
issues on that project.
I believe what a condition of approval for the vineyard project, that the schoolhouse be rebuilt.
It was that if it could be rebuilt, and the planning department made the determination if it was salvageable. I know the Clarksville Historic Society did the evaluation, the initial sort of first look at it, but it's falling down, so.
My recollection was it was salvageable. It just takes a lot of money to do it. Is it worth doing?
Well, I think Jim said if it was salvageable, that's a condition of approval that they would do it, but the county planning department.
Remember that condition, but maybe.
Well, to Commissioner Williams' tribute, if he was here, he would know the answer to that, so.
I'll call him.
So we can look up all those things. So, all right, very good. Anything else on infrastructure? Seeing none. Economic development, Glenn, sorry to put you back last, but hopefully you're able to give us a report on what's been going on at CDAC and other places.
Okay, let's see if I can bring this home for you. A couple of updates. Pioneer Community Energy, who spoke to this group last month, has now had 2 meetings in El Dorado Hills, and I think their next is November 2nd in Placerville at the Supervisor Chambers, as they continue to share information about providing electricity starting next year. Next week, CDAC is meeting, and we are going to have a presentation on the Mohana project. I'm assuming it's going to pretty much be the same that they presented to APAC about Highway 50 development. Is that the Town and Country Village, or is that being called something else now?
Town and Country Village.
Okay.
Town and Country Village is the official name that the proponents have put with it. So that's the tag.
Okay. Well, they're going to present to us as they're going around talking to anybody who wants to see what they have to say. So they're going to be coming. The ad hoc committee on industrial hemp will be presenting next week to the full CDAC committee, and then their findings will be presented along with the Ag Commission to the Board of Supervisors when they go to consider their expiring current ban on hemp agriculture in our county. And then the ad hoc committee on housing is working to finalize a letter of support for workforce housing in the county on parcels that are properly zoned. And looks like CDAC is going to have a conversation about recommending that the county hire a grant writer to be under the I guess under the control or under the direction of the econ dev department to try to take advantage of a lot of the monies that are out there for new grants. And I know a lot of people write their own grants within the county, but they don't have a dedicated grant writer. So we're going to propose it to see if it's something that would make sense and is viable for the county. So those are some of the things that CDAC's looking at. Any questions?
The review of the fairground facilities and their operations, that hasn't started yet, is that correct?
Regrettably, that has not started, so we are expecting an update from Econ Development in our meeting next week, and we will forward that information on. They were delayed because they were going to have the fair, and then the fair was postponed, and I'm not sure how much the Kaldor Fire might have affected them, but we're still hoping to get them to sit down and talk to us.
All right, very good. So any questions from the leadership team of Glenn? Not seeing anybody here in the audience who wants to speak to it. Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, so I think we're ready to go to council member items. And I will just mention that I just looked at the Board of Supervisors schedule, and after the October 14th redistricting meeting, there is one scheduled for November the 3rd. So that's the next date for redistricting stuff to look at, November the 3rd. So I'll just mention that. And I didn't realize that had been tagged until I looked at the Board of Supervisors schedule, and that's what it's showing. So council member items, next meeting is Monday, November 1st. So that would be 2 days before the special redistricting meeting. So we can remind everybody, I guess, if we have more information. Next month, as I mentioned, our guest speaker, I want to have somebody from county planning, and I'm not sure if that's going to be Rob Peters or who it is, but just come in and explain PDs and why they're part of the zoning ordinance, and how does planning view PD proposals as opposed to standard subdivisions and all those kinds of things. Just get some dialogue started and some knowledge in terms of pluses and minuses, because there's both. So that's all I had. Is there any go backs anybody has here?
I have one.
Yeah.
Well, my email's getting pretty full up along with the supervisor's emails concerning Central El Dorado Hills, which is fine. But I checked with Rob Peters today on timing because of Supervisor Heidel had mentioned some of the traffic changes and so forth. So the best guess we have at this point to when it will finally come to the Planning Commission will probably be later this year. But again, with the holidays and so forth, people are always concerned about, having a meeting during the holidays. Reality is probably the first part of January in which that will be heard. So that's the latest. It could change, but that's what I'm hearing. So I thought I'd just put that out there. And I'm sure the emails will continue, and that's fine. So. Yes.
Questions that came up last month was whether or not this revised traffic analysis would require, I hate to say it, another redistribution of the final plan, the
RDEIR again.
Yeah, what I'm hearing tentatively is no, it will not. But a final decision has not been made on that. But that's, I think, the direction they're attempting to go, but that's in process. And if that's the case, then it's going to be a lot later than January. But my timing is based on the fact that we're not going to have to open it up again for public comment. Thanks for clarifying that. So
the argument of that is the traffic requirements are based upon the general plan, LOS, level of service, and not CEQA. So CEQA only looks at VMT now, and there's no impacting conditions with vehicle miles traveled. The impact is associated with circulation, associated with level of service at intersections, in particular on El Rose Boulevard. So that's where the new, surprise came up to some members of DOT who had estimated very low traffic volumes on Saratoga Way compared to the reality of where we are today.
Well, a lot of these things are out of my control, but I tell you, I ask all the time. I'm trying to move them along as best as I can, understanding that, they have, their protocols and things they have to go through. So I'm always reminding them to be as expeditious as possible. So
What are your thoughts on going forward with that if we only have 4 defined planning commissioners? Are you good with that, with 4 planning commissioners as opposed to a full 5? Because I don't know how
Well-
long it's going to take to seat
well, I don't know.
another planning commissioner.
That's a quorum, and that's a super majority, 4 out of 5, but it would be nice that we would have.
Issue is split votes.
Huh?
Issue is split votes.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, you got an
Does
even
that affect
number.
the recommendation that comes to the Board of Supervisors? I
Right.
don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know how to play that game, but I
Oh,
think
I
it's
don't
always
know.
better to have a full commission, but
Well, I'll ask you, you guys had your agenda meeting today, so,
nothing on it for the 12th.
okay,
I don't know where it
Okay.
is.
all right.
I would hope we would have a full planning commission on board.
Well, I'm
for that
hoping
review.
by then, if it's gonna be January, but we'll see. I have obviously no control over that. So, but I'm glad we're gonna have, Andy, at our next hearing. And we're gonna be meeting in person for the first time back at it as well. And I'll also say that Commissioner Williams will be there, because I've asked him to come so we can send him off in a proper way. So be listening in if you want to provide some comments during public comments. He will be there. So,
Dorado Oaks is the primary thing on that agenda. Help me with that one. Is it or not?
no, we have the accessory dwelling.
Okay, ADU stuff. Okay, all right. Because I know Dorado Oaks is something probably Andy will weigh in on.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'm getting my hard copy of the environmental document tomorrow from the applicant. So, but all right.
Very good. So seeing no further, we'll adjourn this meeting at 7:06. Thank you again for your participation and look forward to our meeting in November.